deep within our own galaxy, there are invisible engines cranking out particles with energies that dwarf anything we can create on Earth. We can see the particles themselves, but the engines that power them, well, that's still a huge mystery. So today, we're diving into how scientists are building virtual copies of these cosmic powerhouses to try and hunt down their origin. You know, for decades, astrophysicists have been searching for the source of the most energetic particles in the Milky Way. We see these particles, we call them cosmic rays, all the time. But the massive accelerators that create them, which we've nicknamed PeVatrons, are incredibly elusive. This study really zooms in on one of the prime suspects. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the mystery of these PeVatrons, then look at why microquasars are such a compelling suspect. We'll see how a virtual jet was built to test this idea, and then we'll get into the results, the predictions, the crucial limitations, and what this all means for our picture of the universe. Okay, so our universe is just swimming in a sea of high-energy particles. And finding their sources, these PeVatrons, is honestly one of the biggest puzzles in modern astrophysics. It's kind of like hearing a huge thunderclap, but having no idea where the lightning actually struck. The real problem here is that cosmic rays are charged particles. So as they zip through the galaxy, their paths get all twisted and bent by magnetic fields. It completely scrambles their direction of travel. That means we can't just trace them back to where they came from. We need a totally different kind of messenger, one that travels in a straight line. And that brings us to the microquasars. These things are a top candidate for being one of our galaxy's PeVatrons. This study's whole goal is to build a model of exactly how they might be able to accelerate particles to these absolutely extreme energies. Think of a microquasar as a miniature version of the giant quasars you find at the heart of distant galaxies. You've got a black hole or a neutron star locked in a tight dance with a normal star. As the black hole siphons material off its partner, it doesn't just swallow everything. Some of that matter gets superheated and blasted out in two incredibly focused and violent jets of plasma. And what you're looking at here is what scientists think that jet looks like up close. This is a snapshot right from the simulation. You can see these dense blobs of plasma, sometimes called plasmoids, shooting outwards. It's inside these tangled, chaotic structures where magnetic fields can reconnect and unleash enormous amounts of energy, kicking particles up to incredible speeds. So how in the world do you study something that's thousands of light years away and way too small to see in any real detail? Well, you build a virtual laboratory inside a supercomputer, and that is exactly what this research team did. The truth is, just looking with a telescope can only tell us so much. To really understand the physics happening inside those jets, where the temperatures and magnetic fields are just off the charts, scientists have to turn to simulations. This digital twin lets them poke and prod their theories in a controlled setting. The whole method is basically a three-step pipeline. First, a code called Pluto simulates the basic physics of the jet, how the plasma moves, how the magnetic fields behave. Second, another piece of software calculates the neutrino production happening inside that simulated jet. And finally, they process all that data to create a synthetic image, a prediction of what our telescopes back on Earth might actually see. And the conditions they're simulating here are just extreme. The material in the jet is moving at 80% of the speed of light, the magnetic field is 20,000 times stronger than Earth's, and the sheer power being blasted out is equal to 500 million suns. These are the kinds of mind-boggling conditions you need to create a PeVatron. Okay, so before we look at the results, this is a really important point to make. What we're looking at is a model. It makes predictions based on our understanding of physics. It is not, and this is key, a direct measurement of the sky. Keeping that distinction in mind is absolutely crucial for understanding the findings. All right, now that we understand the setup and its limitations, let's see what this virtual lab actually predicted. The goal, remember, is to find a signal we can look for out in the real world. In this case, that signal is carried by a ghostly little particle called the neutrino. If a microquasar really is a PeVatron, it should be churning out high-energy neutrinos. And unlike those cosmic rays, neutrinos have no charge. They fly in perfectly straight lines, pointing right back to their source. So the question is, if we could point a neutrino telescope at this simulated jet, what would it actually see? And this slide right here is where it all connects. On the left, you see the physical structure of the plasma in the jet. On the right, you see the predicted neutrino emission from that same structure. And look at that. You can see that the brightest spots in neutrino light line up perfectly with those dense blobs in the jet. This is the cause and effect the model is predicting. Now, this graph gives us the predicted fingerprint of that neutrino signal. It's basically plotting how bright the signal should be at different energy levels.
The different colored lines just represent slightly different assumptions about the physics, which gives us a range of possible outcomes. The key takeaway is that this provides a specific energy signature that astronomers can now go out and hunt for.
And this final chart shows us the practical side of things. It translates that predicted brightness into a detection range. It tells us how far away a microquasar like this could be and still be visible to our best neutrino telescopes, like IceCube at the South Pole or the future KM3NeT observatory in the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so we have a prediction. That's great, but to understand its real scientific value, we have to be extremely clear about its limitations. This is really where we separate responsible science from sensational headlines. The most important thing to remember is that this is just one simulation of one specific type of microquasar. Real ones are going to vary. And again, these results are predictions. They are not a discovery. The predicted signal strength also depends pretty heavily on some assumptions about the physics that we're still not totally sure about. Being upfront about these boundaries is just good science. So, if it isn't a discovery, why is this research so important? Well, let's put it into the bigger picture of astrophysics and see what new questions it allows us to ask. The real power of this work is that it gives astronomers a concrete target to shoot for. It gives them a specific energy signature to look for in their data. This is how science moves forward. You turn a general idea into a testable and, just as importantly, a falsifiable hypothesis. It bridges that huge gap between pure theory and actual observation. Let's put it this way. Before this study, the idea was pretty general. Hey, microquasars might make neutrinos. What this model provides is a specific quantitative forecast. If they do, here is what the signal's energy, signature, and brightness could look like. It's a huge leap from a vague possibility to a concrete prediction that can now be tested against reality. So what's the bottom line? What can we responsibly say? This work shows that under a specific set of physical conditions, a microquasar jet could absolutely produce a detectable neutrino signal. It doesn't solve the grand mystery of the PeVatrons, but it gives us a vital new clue. And it leaves us with a much more focused question. As our neutrino telescopes get more and more powerful, will we finally see the faint, ghostly flicker of these hidden cosmic engines?